are not in any way trying to sugarcoat this or make it like, it's just like really simple. You just like find your purpose and then everything is good. No, that's not it. This is really, really, really hard work sometimes. And there are really hard decisions that have to be made.
It's Taj.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I'm joined by...
What up, family? It's Manuel Rustin, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher here in the Los Angeles area. And this, of course, is All the Above, your home for news and analysis of all matters pertaining to our world of education. Now, shout out to anybody that's joining us for the first time. Of course, welcome. We're glad you're here. But extra special shout out to those of you who are joining us for the second or third time, because some of you might have caught wind of our podcast when we had that ethnic studies episode it was our most recent full episode. So 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, something like that. And you might have thought to yourself, well, these two dudes seem pretty dope. Their guests seem super dope. So let me give them another listen. So shout out to you. And if you're still here on listen 3 or 4, or you're watching us on YouTube for the third or fourth episode, you might as well consider yourself AOTA family. Like, you're part of the family now. You are already here. All right. So make sure you hit that follow. Make sure you hit that subscribe, thumbs up, all that good stuff. We could definitely use a positive review so other folks could discover our show. And you might want to go ahead over to our website, AOTAshow.com, and check out past episodes, or go to the little link that says support. So you could be like our AOTA family member, Nolan Fossum. Shout out to Nolan, who bought several AOTA show shirts to represent, and also registered for the Human Restoration Conference, which is coming up in about a month from now, and use the code AOTA to get his discount for that. So be like Nolan, support the show, AOTAshow.com/support, buy some merch, and head over to humanrestorationproject.org/conference to sign up for their virtual conference and use code AOTA show at checkout for a $25 discount that goes to support the show, this 2-person operation. And Jeff, man, we need more family members like Nolan. I do believe.
Yeah, I gotta echo the shout out to Nolan. He's always asking like really deep math instructional questions on Twitter. Yeah. Like if you need an account that's going to help you just like think more profoundly about your practice, and a very I guess you call it like transparent practitioner who is sharing not only the cool, exciting things he's trying, but also like, is it working? Is it not working? What good ideas are out there? I mean, as a practitioner, I think he's a great follow on Twitter. So shout out, Nolan, for your content, generally speaking, and also very much appreciate the support for All the Above here. Thank you.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, so shout out to everybody out there who's watching and listening and following the show and being part of these dope conversations. Now, Jeff, I have just started my summer break, and we know that you, as a super duper dope principal leader man, do not have a summer break. However, many teachers who are embarking on their summer break are currently exploring, reflecting, thinking about the level to which they feel like they could really keep going in this profession, because this is a very difficult profession. And I know on my campus, there have been conversations about burnout, and especially from some of our younger teachers, some of our newer teachers, which is really worrisome, of course. So maybe we should take some time out on today's show. Maybe if we could get some guests on show, maybe who could like talk to us a bit about burnout and about sustainability in this profession, because of course we know how important it is to keep dope educators in the field. And we don't want to see folks burning out, Jeff. We know there's a lot to it. It gets complex. It's not so simple of an issue. But I don't know, Jeff. I know you probably already have an agenda, a lesson plan written out, but I'm thinking maybe we could find somebody for this episode who could talk to us about that. Jeff, what do you think? What's on the agenda for today?
You know what I think, Manuel? Not only did we find somebody to talk about this subject, we found 2 somebodies to talk about this subject. I am so excited for today's conversation in our seminar, folks, because not only are we going to be digging deep into this very timely, very important topic, right? It's also the sort of tail end, I guess you might say, of the teacher hiring season. It is that time of year where the teacher shortage is being felt acutely by principals and districts across the country. And of course, in a few months, when classrooms open with long-term subs, it will also be felt acutely by many teachers across the country. But this is a huge issue right now, Manuel. And not only is that just fascinating for us to dig into these issues of teacher retention and sustainability and burnout, but also our two guests today, who are Rebekah Shoaf and Meredith Matson, educators, New York-based educators. Meredith's a principal in New York. Rebekah is a education consultant and someone who helps create and empower innovative high schools. Not only are we going to talk about their new book, which is Educating with Passion and Purpose, Keep the Fire Going Without Burning Out. Incredible new text, a very practitioner-friendly text that is hot off the press and out wherever you get your books today. But also, Manuel, back in the day, way back in the day, circa 2008, I had the great privilege and honor of being a coach for these two wonderful guests and now authors that we're having on the show. So it's going to be also a little bit of a reunion of sorts. But folks, it's going to be a fascinating discussion today about a topic that's close to the heart of anyone who works in schools or cares about schools. So stick around. You definitely don't want to miss it.
Sounds dope. Sounds dope. But folks, this is a full episode. We're not just going to have our super duper dope guests. We are also going to discuss headlines in education. So we're going to have a do now. We're going to look at what's going on in the world of education. All right. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. All right, folks. Now it's time for today's do now. Let's take a look at news and headlines in the world of education. Jeff, how are we going to do the do now today?
Well, Manuel, we have a outstanding pedagogical move for our audience today, Manuel, which is sure to not only be authentic, but deep and meaningful mode of assessment for all of our listeners and viewers today, Manuel. We got a pop quiz. Pop quiz.
Pop quiz. It's summertime, Jeff. Man, we're not supposed to be quizzing people, but I guess this is sounds like a East Coast reunion situation type of episode because y'all three started your careers on the East Coast, so they're still in school on the East Coast. So let's go ahead and give them a quiz. Why not? All right, Jeff.
Exactly.
First quiz question for today: if a graduation takes place, but there's no one there to graduate, is it still a graduation?
Wow, that is a profound question. I'm not sure, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it. Here's what I'll say, Manuel. Regardless of what you call it, it is thoroughly depressing. That's my answer.
Yeah, that's good foreshadowing for this story, Jeff. It's not a feel-good story. We'll go ahead and say that. All right, so we got this thanks to NPR, thanks to some good reporting from Bill Chappelle. And he reports that seniors at Marlin High School, which is located in a small town southeast of Waco, Texas, these seniors were recently stunned when the school district abruptly announced that their graduation ceremony would be postponed after only 5 students met the requirements to get a diploma. According to Marlin Independent School District Superintendent Daryl Henson, an initial internal audit of attendance and grades and credits showed that the majority of the 33 students who make up the senior class did not meet the statewide requirements needed to earn a diploma. At a meeting with administrators, parents spoke out about the abrupt notification and the toll it was taking on students and family, some of whom even had relatives traveling from Mexico for this graduation. Students at the meeting vehemently disagreed with school officials who claimed support had been provided to help students meet graduation requirements. Students aired their frustrations over many issues, calling out teachers who are frequently absent and administrators who delayed telling students about their remaining class hour credits, only to relay different numbers later. The superintendent posted on Twitter saying, quote, "Let this be a lesson learned for all. As we continue to go through our annual graduation audit, it's our obligation to ensure that all students have met all requirements." The most recent Texas Schools Report Card assigned Marlin High School a B rating, which is, of course, an assessment based on how it performs compared to other schools with student populations in similar economic conditions. So, Jeff, graduation season. So these seniors were excited to graduate. Evidently, a lot of them went on a Six Flags trip and all the, senior festivities and all that. And then were apparently stunned, shocked, blindsided to find out that the graduation would not be happening, at least when it was scheduled, because only 5 seniors met the statewide requirements. Jeff, not a feel-good story, man. Not a feel-good story. What are your thoughts on this?
This story is wild, Manuel. I have so many thoughts. I'm going to try to just keep it concise here in my response. The first, Manuel, is I had traumatic flashbacks to my very first year of teaching, a story which I've shared with you before, but I'll share briefly here with the audience, which was at a high school in East Harlem, New York. And it was one of the many small schools that had been created. And it was one that frankly was struggling and very poorly managed at that time. This school has since been closed. And we had a graduation ceremony, Manuel, that took place in the auditorium at the school, which was a little bootleg to begin with, I have to say. But, it is what it is. There were 6 students who were sitting on the stage and who walked that day. 6. Now, this was a small high school. We only had 300, maybe a little less than 300 students. But still, okay? So unacceptable and depressing. And that day was the closest I came to quitting being an educator, because I was so depressed about what I had seen and just feeling like I don't know if this is the right move for me. So all that to say, Manuel, it's wild that in this day and age, okay, with modern data systems, with modern accountability structures, there is no way imaginable, Manuel, that the educators involved in this equation, this is obviously a small school, small district, the principal, potentially the superintendent, the counselor, whoever was involved, should not have been able to see well in advance that these students were not on track to graduate, right? And it is conceivably possible that you might have one kid in the group where there was some kind of technicality that resulted in an unexpected not graduating on time, okay? It's totally I can't help, Manuel, but just say in as much as it is, of course, the responsibility of students and families to engage in school and complete the requirements of school, it is preposterous that it got to this point. And these kids and their families are surprised by the fact that they're not graduating, to the point that the district capitulates and says, oh, we got to push back the date of graduation. They're the failures were from top to bottom in this situation. And it is sad in terms of what it means about the educational experience of these young folks. It's also just inexcusable in terms of the function of a school system. So there needs to be some very serious changes, or some heads got to roll somewhere in this equation.
Yeah, man, for sure. Definitely inexcusable. Now, I teach high school. I happen to teach mostly juniors now, but there were times where I had a lot of seniors. And in any case, I know most folks who are crossing that stage, and I have only rarely seen the destruction on a student's face when they find out at the last minute, at the last moments, that they're not going to be able to cross that stage. It's kind of rare because in this day and age, as you said, all these data systems that we have, all these communication methods that we have, it shouldn't really come as a big surprise. By the time graduation is scheduled and approaching, students should have a pretty good idea of whether or not they're going to make it. Of course, there's always, you got to pass your final classes and all that. But for the most part, having only 5 out of 33 and then needing to announce on Facebook that graduation has been postponed. Yeah, that's really inexcusable. Somebody definitely dropped the ball here in a very major way. And I feel so bad for the students and their families. Now, teaching high school for 19 years, I think there have been times where I've had to catch myself, because in my head sometimes I think what the meaning of a high school diploma now versus what it used to be, and looking at I don't know, looking at the path that students take to graduate high school and then all the challenges that face them after that. Sometimes in my head, I'm like, it's just high school graduation. Like, it's not even that big of a deal. But that moment lasts just for a moment, just for a second, because of course, it's a giant deal, and it's especially a really giant deal for marginalized populations like the students at Marlin High School, which is something like 99% of the students there qualify for free and reduced lunch. And I have many students who are the first in their family to even make it to high school, let alone actually graduate high school, let alone make it to college and then graduate from college. So it's really a giant deal. So anybody who doesn't work with high schoolers or isn't really in education like that, who thinks like, oh, what's a high school graduation nowadays? So what, take some summer school, you'll get there. Like, I can't emphasize enough how big of a deal this is for those families. And to think that some of these families had arrangements already with relatives to travel from Mexico to be there at the graduation, it's just so heartbreaking to know that those plans got postponed. This, according to the story, graduation is postponed until sometime in June. Of course, this episode airs in June, so there might be some updates by the time this comes out. But either way, it's ugly. It's ugly, and we got to do better as the adults in the system to make sure that things like this don't happen. Like, this school got a B rating, so that just again goes to show that these ratings that are largely based on test scores and such only mean so much, because when only 5 students are able to graduate and the senior class wasn't aware of the possibility that graduation would be postponed in the first place, there's a lot of problems there. Hopefully, this is something that obviously never happens again. And this is one school and one school district that is considering going to a 4-day week because of according to the story, 4-day week because of the absenteeism. It sounds like it's not just the students, but the teachers as well. And to be more competitive, to get more teachers because they are experiencing a teacher shortage. And yeah, man, trouble in the water, man. Not a good thing over here, man. Not a good thing. So sad for those students. And yeah, I wish them the best. I hope there's some kind of way that things could get, you can't really make up for this. I don't even know what that would even look like. So just sad.
Yeah, 100% sad. And man, well, I have to say, you said a minute ago that, there's no way, given, modern data systems and this sort of thing, that like these students shouldn't have known, before the end of the line and, in May or June. Man, well, there's no reason these students and their families shouldn't have known a year ago. Okay. Like where they are now. I will say it is not unusual at all in American public schooling, and especially in the context like this school is, where a school can do its due diligence, inform students and families, do all, like, go above and beyond, and a student maybe still doesn't make it, right? And sometimes that student or the family will come into school and sort of protest. And you have to, be like, listen, here's the call log. Here's the record of, interventions we tried. Like, here, we tried to have meetings with you. Like, we have been sending home transcripts. Like we have been doing our job in this equation. And an unfortunate part of the work of being an administrator and a counselor, especially in these kind of situations, is sometimes having those tough situations. But those are the exceptions, like the few exceptions to the rule, right? Which should be a huge graduation ceremony with the vast majority of the kids. And then there's like a couple that you got to have a tough conversation with, right? So something clearly went very wrong here, and there's no way it's just on the kids and families, like literally no way.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to everybody at my school. I know they've been rounding up seniors, and there have been, when I do have a senior who is retaking a class and like behind on credits and needs to do this, needs to do that, I swear they get called and called out of class like all the time by somebody making sure like that this is clear and that you're good for this and do you need help with that. And there's just so much communication, so much work being done to make sure that every single senior is, first of all, set up and supported to cross the finish line, but also very well aware of the challenges ahead and what they have to do. So like, shout out to everybody out there in the school system who is making sure that things like this don't happen, because damn, that's sad. That's sad. All right, Jeff, we do have another quiz question though for today. All right, before we get out of here. So what we got?
Yes, sir. Next question, Manuel, is what's the best way, the very best way, Manuel, to help families do better in school?
Oh, well, That's kind of obvious, Jeff. I mean, anybody that listens to our passing periods, which are the audio-only versions of our show that come out in between these full video productions, knows that we covered a story that showed more funding for schools, more investment in schools and families and students does wonders to help people, help young people achieve and prosper in school systems. So I would say more investment, more funding, all of that.
That is a smart, humane, responsible, effective answer, Manuel. Props to you. And unfortunately, tragically, at least in the state of Michigan right now, it is absolutely dead wrong, Manuel. There, the answer appears to be make them poorer. Okay, make them poorer. So let's dig into this story here, folks. This comes to us by Kobe Levin in Chalkbeat, coming out of Detroit. So shout out to Kobe and Chalkbeat. And each year, under state law in Michigan, families have cash benefits yanked from hundreds of poor families because their children don't attend school regularly enough. Thousands more families who apply for this benefit are rejected because of their historic attendance records. In addition, Michigan law allows for chronically absent children and their parents to face court charges. The state has enforced this policy for at least a decade, even though family poverty is a leading contributor to student absenteeism, and some research has found that punitive approaches to chronic absenteeism don't actually work. Students who are considered chronically absent, meaning generally that they miss at least 10% of school days over the course of the year, are more likely to struggle academically and drop out. Policies like the one in Michigan, however, ignore the often complicated set of challenges that families face, and they assume parents whose children are chronically absent don't care about their children's education or future. One of the parents featured in the article said most of the days her daughter has missed have been because of her own chronic health problems, and how they made it difficult for her to walk her daughter to school, and because she feared letting her daughter walk to school on her own in their rough neighborhood. The parent doesn't have a car, is unable to work, and doesn't have a strong support system to help. So, Manuel, I think as a educator in a low-income context, I'm sure that you have many, many encounters with the conundrum of chronic absenteeism for certain students and how that is a family phenomenon in many ways. And I'm sure what you and your district have done is take money out of the pocket of those families and then seen a remarkable turnaround. All of a sudden, the student shows up and is well-adjusted and happy and ready to go. I'm sure that's what you've seen, right? And that's why this is such a great idea coming out of Michigan, right?
Yeah, Jeff, of course, because we're patriots. We're patriots. We know how we do things here in America. So yeah, when I have a student who's been missing and they finally pop back up and they're like, I'm sorry, but my grandmother was in the hospital. I had to stay home to watch my baby brother, and things are really hard. I tell them to run me their money. Open up them pockets, whatever you got. It's mine now. It's punishment for you not being here. Yeah, Jeff, this is very sad. Also not surprising. So it's happening in Michigan. I'm sure it's happening in other places. And obviously this effort to punish folks, to use punitive measures, it just doesn't work. It flat out doesn't work. None of these folks, the family profiled in the story, the students that I interact with who have challenges with getting to school, none of them are in a situation where like they just aren't trying. Like all of them have challenges, some kind of major challenges, economic challenges, health challenges, mental health challenges that is making it very difficult for them to make it to school. And this effort to punish folks is punishing the poor for being poor doesn't work. It is really, really brutal when you really think about it. When you think about the woman profiled in the story, she was talking about her health challenges. Like the photo that they have of her, like you could see on her face, like one of the health challenges that she mentioned was very painful, debilitating eczema. And you could see that on her face. And to punish her for not letting her elementary age daughter walk to school through a dangerous neighborhood on her own, it just doesn't make any sense. All right, this is a woman who obviously wants her daughter to succeed in education and succeed in life, and she's trying her best to be a mother, to be a single mother, and to strip this benefit from her will only make things more difficult. So things like this don't work. One aspect of it, like being a teacher, being an educator who has a lot of conversations with folks around education, both at my school site and outside of my school site. One observation that I have is just how many folks who, despite all the anti-racism talk, despite all the equity talk, despite even decolonizing the school system being like a buzzword for some folks, there's just so many people who, despite all that and despite saying the right things, who still cling to this notion of like punitive measures as the solution for the various challenges that present themselves in the school system. So still wanting to punish students around the cell phone issue, like, oh, send them to the administrator, suspend them, this and that. There's schools that suspend students for being absent. There's still a lot of folks who seem to just reach immediately for those punitive measures, which are so colonial, which are so American and patriotic, and just don't work. Punishing schools for test scores doesn't work. Punishing students for not making it to school, it doesn't work. Punishing students for turning in late work, that doesn't turn a student around. Like, these punitive measures, they just don't work. They just don't work. They lack humanity, and they lack creative thinking for how to help support folks who are dealing with various challenges. It's really, really tiresome. Really, really sad. I feel for parents like the one profiled here who just wants the best for her daughter, and the state basically has this feeling that she isn't doing enough, and the approach to it is to punish her. And that's so American, so patriotic. It's quite disgusting.
Yeah, that's a great encapsulation of the issue here, Manuel. I will say, in my 20 years of experience as a K-12 educator, which has involved a great number of interactions with students and families that are chronically absent from school. And I will say, Manuel, I cannot think of one example. Honestly, I can't think of one example where the family was not in some deep mode of crisis in some way, right? Whether it was the child was, chronically depressed and, couldn't get out of bed and those sorts of things, or whether it was, crazy, man. This is a perfect also encapsulation, a story from my school in the Bronx, right? We were right across the street from two very large housing projects, right? We had a student who lived literally across the street from the school, okay, in destitute poverty. Both parents were deceased, living with the grandmother. The grandmother's in a wheelchair, and the elevators are always broken in the buildings in the projects. And they live on like the 12th floor or something like that, right? And so the kid is sleeping on the floor, basically, struggling to survive and raise himself. The grandmother, pardon me, the grandmother's in a wheelchair and can't get down the stairs to escort the child to school or to even come and meet with us at the school, even though they live right across the street, right? So these are the kinds of issues that we're grappling with when it comes to chronic absenteeism, right? It's destitute poverty in many situations, and in others, it's very serious, like mental health concerns or physical health concerns that are putting boundaries in front of kids attending school. There's not just a blanket solution for this. It's very easy from the outside to look at it and say, like, how hard is it to send your kid to school? The school's doing all these things for you. They're giving you basically free childcare. Like, just get your kid there, and to see it as neglect, right? And I will say there's a component of chronic absenteeism that can be a manifestation of abuse and neglect, right? That is real, and it's important for schools and state authorities and things to try to suss that out. And I would venture to say that in most of the cases that I have experienced, chronic absenteeism is a symptom of life being extremely hard on a subset of students and families where the social safety net has been totally ineffectual, and where the kind of cold, callous brutality of our capitalist society has landed the weight of oppression hardest on these folks in a variety of ways, right? And that is not to take away their agency in this situation. That is not to, sort of say, oh, woe is them, and, we should just let chronic absenteeism go and not do anything about it. But the idea that what we would do is pull on the lever that says you're poor and you're struggling and grappling with crippling poverty, and what we need to do is take away more of your money to punish you for not coming to school, and that'll make it work, is ineffective, insulting, and compounding of the problems we're confronting, Manuel. And just a quick note about what we're talking about here. This benefit in the state of Michigan that they're referencing, only families that earn under $7,000 a year are eligible for this benefit, okay? Now, it doesn't matter where you are in the country, Manuel. $7,000 a year it's not even right to describe that as poverty. That is literal destitution level poverty, right? Like you can't afford any of the basics, food, clothes, or shelter, with $7,000 a year. And the benefit that they get is a measly like $439, I believe the article said. And they pull the $439, right? And parallel to this, if a family earns more than $7,000, let's say they earn a little more money and it goes up to like $10,000, they get less than $439 as this extra cash benefit. So the layers of punitiveness in this, Manuel, and the trap of poverty that's very evident here are just like, it's off the charts. And so, yes, we need to do something about this. Yes, this is an urgent issue, and there's not even a tiny piece of this that is anything approaching the right way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope, I don't know what the status is in Michigan for folks who are organizing against this and organizing to change this, but I'm sure many states have something similar on the books, or many districts or regions have something similar on the books. And I mean, there's enough evidence, there's enough years and decades to look back on to see that punitive measures like this don't help anybody. If anything, they make it worse. And if your end goal is to help this young person access their education, high quality education, and be able to prosper, support is needed. Support, not punishment. Punishment is only going to make it harder for that young person to ever be able to healthily access their education. So yeah, man, 2 not great stories. Not feel good at all. And somebody might be listening who just endured a very difficult school year of their own. And they're wondering, like you were wondering, Jeff, back in the Bronx, whether or not this is the field for them. All right. So what better time than now to have a conversation about burnout and sustainability and how we can continue to fight for educational justice while also sustaining ourselves in this work and not letting it chew us up and spit us out. All right. So up next, seminar.
Hey folks, thanks so much for tuning in to All the Above. We really appreciate you. And as you know, All the Above is a small operation. It's just me and just Manuel, that's it. We have no sponsorships, which means we are totally dependent on our amazing audience to help support the show. So here's what you can do. Go to our website, which is aotashow.com/support. That's aotashow.com/support. There you can find links to everything you can do to support the show. You find all the links to every platform that we're on where you can like, subscribe, follow. Make sure you share our show with your whole network. Also, you can donate there. We are on Venmo, we're on Cash App, and most importantly, you can find the link to our Anchor page where you can become a monthly patron. Even a small donation once a month will make a huge difference in helping us continue to produce the show. Lastly, you can find there the link to get your flyest, best, latest, all the above show merch. Okay, all you gotta do is go to aotashow.com/support. Thanks, enjoy the rest of the show. All right, folks, welcome to today's seminar. Thanks so much for joining us. And we are incredibly excited to be bringing to the show today 2 amazing guests who are going to help us unpack really a powerful, timely, and important issue that is frankly impacting educators everywhere. And that is both a systemic issue with which we are all grappling related to teacher shortages, and also a very local individual issue. And that relates to the topic of sustainability and burnout for educators. And we have Rebekah Shoaf and Meredith Matson with us, authors of a brand new book, Educating with Passion and Purpose. I got my copy here. Thanks, Meredith and Rebekah, for joining us today, and welcome to All the Above.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let me tell you a little bit more about our guests. Rebekah Shoaf is the founder and CEO of What If Schools. It's an education consultancy that helps educators design new schools and redesign existing ones. She's the founder of Boogie Down Books, a bookstore without walls for kids, families, and educators in the Bronx and beyond. Over her 20-plus year career, Rebekah was a high school English teacher, a department leader, and a coach for teachers across New York City. Meredith Matson is principal at the Urban Assembly School of Design and Construction in New York City. She taught for 11 years and was an assistant principal, a department leader, and a peer coach. She's currently in her 5th year as principal. Her philosophy of promoting high expectations, relationship building, and spaces to reflect is at the core of her work in the classroom and the principal's office. Welcome again. We're so excited to have you here, and I'm going to kick it over to Manuel for our first question.
Yeah, we got passion and purpose and dopeness in the building. Thank you both for being here on All of the Above. And we very much appreciate you taking the time out. And the last time we had somebody on our show who was discussing their book, I mentioned that as a classroom teacher, it's kind of difficult for me to get into full books about education during the school year, because when I'm reading, I'm trying to get out of it. I'm trying to escape. I'm on another planet reading my science fiction or something like that. But this book came out really at a perfect time. Just wrapped up the school year, and our school year ended with many conversations on campus about burnout. So I'm looking forward to digging into this, educating with passion and purpose, keeping the fire going without burning out. And in it, you discuss your professional journeys as educators and how you've been able to use your purpose as a driver of sustainability in this work. So how about we start there, and how about you help us understand what the role is of your purpose as a method for avoiding burnout, and why is tapping into one's purpose to avoid burnout easier said than done for a lot of educators? And how about we start with Rebekah?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Manuel, I totally identify with your desire to not read education books while working full-time in education. Meredith and I were really committed to making sure that the book was as accessible and readable as possible. So it really focuses on our personal stories, and it's less than 200 pages long. So that was really important to us. When we first started writing this book, we thought that we were writing first and foremost about burnout, not about purpose. But we started exploring what the clinical definition of burnout actually is. And we were really struck by the Mayo Clinic's definition, which essentially says that burnout is a state of physical or emotional exhaustion, as well as a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. So in other words, burnout results when you feel like you've lost your passion, your power, and your purpose. And when we thought about burnout through that lens and considered our own experiences as teachers, coaches, and leaders, we realized that it was really about purpose, that was really what we wanted to write about and what we needed to write about. So, we recognize that reorienting our work and life around purpose can be easier said than done, as you said, because schools are generally not reflective spaces, honestly, certainly not for adults and often not for students either. So thinking about your purpose as an educator, and by that we mean the why of your work rather than like the how or the what or the when or the where, is at odds with how the system actually works. And that's why it can be really, really, really hard.
Yeah, I want to just also echo what Rebekah said about like reading during the school year, what Manuel, you were saying. Like at my school currently, we have a book club that is like non-educational books, because teachers all educators need time to just read things that are not related to education. But what Rebekah said was so true. When we wrote this book, we really thought about it being user-friendly and teacher-friendly. So the stories are, kind of changing, and it's an easy read. But what you were just saying about purpose and your why, just like deeply connecting to it, I think is so important, because as educators, we are doing the work for so many other people. We have to show up every single day and kind of like sometimes escape what's happening in our lives to show up for our students, which is so hard to do. It really is so hard to really take, what's happening in our lives away sometimes when we have to just like be there for our kids. But the way to do that is to really, I believe, tap into your why, tap into that passion. Why are we here? What are we doing? So you could show up best for your kids every day. And I know it's hard. Sometimes we're sitting in professional development. Sometimes I'm running the professional developments that maybe aren't connected to the educators in the room. But what I think we have to do as educators is sit back and say, okay, we have to ground ourselves a little bit and be like, I'm in this space, and how can I make this space best for the kids that I work with every single day? I truly believe that education is one of the hardest jobs in the world because we are having direct impact on the kids in our spaces. So in order to do that, we got to take care of ourselves. And I really believe that like triggering into our why, getting connected deeper to our why is what can help us really take care of ourselves as educators. And it's really important for teachers to create space for that, and for school leaders to create space for that in order to keep their teachers going.
Yeah, such important points there. And this episode is going to air in mid-June-ish. And I feel like that is perhaps the point in the calendar year when, if we were to graph, exhaustion and tiredness among educators, it might reach its peak there. And, the kinds of questions that you all offer in your book, I think, are really meaty and important for educators to think about. All of us, I imagine, on some level have grappled with these kinds of things at one point or another. And these are the questions like, why am I doing this? Is this still the right profession for me? Why am I not finding the same type of joy and meaning in the work that I once did, or if I even once did? And in this current context, coming off of, three of what have probably been the most complex and challenging school years in the history of our profession, what kind of words of advice might you offer to educators, especially in this context of a national teacher shortage? What words of advice would you offer to educators who are grappling with these kinds of questions and contemplating even a potential career change? And Rebekah, how about we start with you?
Sure. As Meredith said, teachers have the hardest job. The hardest job in our society, and frankly, in many cases, the hardest job on our planet. In my experience, it was the best job also. I think that if people feel called to do that work, Meredith and I want to help them continue to do that work. But we know that that work has to be done in a sustainable way. One thing that I think about a lot is teaching as an exercise in delayed gratification. That was often my own experience. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because in the book, I tell several stories about my own high school English teacher, Miss Leone, who is the person more than anyone else. And there were a lot of people, but I would say more than anyone else, Miss Leone made me the reader, writer, thinker, and educator that I am. When I was a student in her 11th and 12th grade English classes, never once did I tell her how important she was to me. Never once did I tell her what an impact she was having on me. I tried to do the best that I could in her class. I tried to be, a great student, but I never told her how much she meant to me. And 10 years later, I bumped into her in the parking lot of a supermarket in Miami, which is where I grew up and went to high school. And I went running up to her and was like, Miss Leone. And she remembered me. And I was like, I'm a high school English teacher because of you. And she was shocked. And now 15 years later, I wrote a book and I talk about her in it. Teaching is often an exercise in delayed gratification. You do not often know the impact that you are having, but what makes it such an amazing profession and frankly calling is that on any given day at 10 in the morning, something can happen in your classroom that will transform the course of a young person's life forever. And that is why this work is so important. So if you feel called to do that work, if that is the kind of work that you want to do, it is worth it. But we also recognize that there are all kinds of systemic forces that are making it really, really hard to do that transformative work in a sustainable way. And we hope that for folks who read the book, that they get some tools and some practices and approaches and things to think about that can help them to do the work in a sustainable way, even though that does mean coming up against the system in some ways.
The thing I keep thinking about right now is, and I'm seeing it a lot recently, is that how much, educators, we went through a lot with COVID. And I feel like we really need to recognize that. I mean, being able to, when COVID happened and we transformed into online classes and then we come back to the schools, our lives changed a little bit, but we're back in the same schools, in the same setting, with the same expectations and the same weight on us to impact the kids that are in front of us. And I think what educators need to do now more than ever is really align most aspects of their work with why they're doing this. It's something that Rebekah and I write in the book. We have a whole chapter dedicated to curriculum, and where we talk about how we were able to create lessons that were aligned to what we believe in. And I know that some people don't have a choice. They're handed a curriculum. They're given, you must teach this. But I think that an important tool is to go through, if you're handed that mandated curriculum, and ask yourself, what am I being asked to teach? And does this connect to what I believe in? And if it doesn't, what are things I can do to potentially change to make sure I'm working within what I believe in? And if I feel like this isn't doing justice for kids, what do I need to do? Because I think sometimes when we see that misalignment, and even now more than ever, that's when people start leaving. I also think when it comes to school policies, like how we have a whole chapter about how we teach also, people really need to start thinking about this, because I think that's what will keep people that are here for the calling in the profession longer. I have to just share this story because it happened to me today. I happened to go get my nails done today, which I never ever do in the mornings on a Saturday. And I happened to be sitting next to a woman who is a teacher, and she was talking to me about her job and her stresses, and she feels like she's not aligned with things. And we started just talking about a little bit of like, okay, what does that mean? I think right now is the time to start having conversations with, maybe it's someone you trust. If you're not feeling aligned, is it time that I need to go find a new home because I still have years in me to do this job? Or do I need to say, what can I do in my current situation to make sure I'm aligned? Because we don't want to lose amazing educators. And it was really a powerful moment for me this morning. And I, just wanted to share that because I think it's important for people to have these conversations.
I think what Meredith is touching on is, really getting a sense of where we do have power. One thing that I really feel from my own time as a classroom teacher, as well as from the work I've done as a coach working with classroom teachers, is the way in which a sense of powerlessness can be so pervasive among teachers. And Jeff, I hope it's okay to say this, like you read an early copy of the book. And during one of our conversations after that, I remember you saying to me, and it really meant a lot to me, that you felt like the book really kind of maybe reminded you, correct me, on what exact word you would use here, but like really brought to the forefront for you the way that teachers are just like subject to the whims of so many things that are outside of their control, and also held accountable for those things. And one thing that Meredith is really talking about there is helping teachers to really see where they do have power, what they do have control of. And I think that is a really important thing to help support teachers. Like for those of us who are coaches or leaders, like helping teachers who are struggling to really see what they can control and where they do have power. And that's different for every educator. But I do think that often we have more power than we realize. I also think, Jeff, you highlighted the timing of this book. Meredith and I also have a whole chapter on being the lead learner. And we really believe that helping educators to reconnect when necessary, or just stay connected to their identity as a learner, is really, really essential. And the summer is a really fantastic time to do that. So in that chapter in particular, we have tons of strategies and recommendations for teachers to reconnect to why they wanted to be in education in the first place, and how they see themselves as a learner, and what really excites and drives them when it comes to the learning process and the learning experience.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, just to follow up a little bit on that, because yeah, a lot of teachers that I've had conversations with, when they question whether or not they're going to stay in it, one phrase that I hear a lot from folks is like, "Oh, it's not the kids, it's not the kids, it's everything else." So often teachers who do leave the classroom, or educators who leave the profession, leave not because of the young people, but because of all these systems and policies that we're held accountable to. So right now, there's probably someone listening to this episode or watching our episode on YouTube who is thinking about all the, either a colleague or administrators or other things that they are held accountable to that conflict with elements of their purpose. So just any advice that you have for that young or maybe not young educator who's listening to this, who's really wondering about what do they do about this fact that, like, they got in it for this reason, this is their purpose, this is what drives them, but it conflicts with so much of the reality of their school building or their district or wherever they happen to teach. Like, and any words of advice for that person?
I'm thinking two things. One thing I always say to someone, and this is maybe before they I don't think educators realize how much power they have when interviewing at a school, and really getting a sense of what is the mission of the school, what's the vision of the school, and is that aligned to what I believe in? I think that is one place to just start at. And of course, people live in different spaces and places, and sometimes you got to say yes to the job, even if it's misaligned. But I do think at least knowing that is really, really important. And I know that's a first step. But if you're the teacher that's already in a school or already in a district and you are misaligned and really struggling or feeling like you're being held accountable for so many things, I mean, the thing I always go back to is, are you doing what's right by kids? And are you really pushing students in their thinking and pushing them into believe that they can be the best they can be, and allowing them to connect to their cultural identity within your space, within your classroom? And if you're doing all of these things, you have a lot of power within your classroom. I think it's that when there are strong, really good teachers doing a lot of amazing work within their classroom, they have a lot of power. I always think about my transition from teacher to assistant principal to principal. And in a lot of ways, people are like, oh, you have more control. And in a lot of ways, no, I have less control. Like in a classroom, in the classroom, in those four walls, I could do so much. And as you move throughout the journey as an educator, or move to assistant principal to principal, in a lot of ways, now I can, yes, try to share this vision, but the actual direct impact on kids in a way lessens. So take that role as educator so serious and really try to ask yourself, what do I have control of? What do I believe in? And right now you got 30 kids sitting in front of you. So that's where the most important work is. And if you really have a strong vision and you're pushing kids to be the best that they can be, you have to continue to do it. And I know, again, that might sound easier said than done. And, but you sometimes have to take risks or speak up if you're putting your students first.
Meredith has referenced it a couple of times. We have a chapter in the book called Finding Your Professional Home, and she was just speaking about, the hiring process. And in that chapter, we say for teachers who are in exactly the predicament that you just described, Manuel, I'm going to actually I want to read from it here. If you realize that you're in a community that's at odds with your sense of purpose, you have 4 choices. That's it. And the 4 choices are: 1, do nothing and suffer. 2, change what you can about yourself. 3, change what you can about your community using whatever influence you have. And 4, find a community that shares your purpose. And sometimes that's what has to be done. And as Meredith said, it can be very, very difficult. We are not in any way trying to sugarcoat this or make it it's just really simple. You just find your purpose and then everything is good. No, that's not it. This is really, really, really hard work sometimes. And there are really hard decisions that have to be made. And I have been in the shoes of teachers who are making those decisions. I have had to make those really hard decisions about, can I stay here or do I need to go? But if the choice is leaving the profession altogether or finding a professional home that is aligned with your purpose, we hope that educators will find a new home when necessary and go to a place where they do feel like their purpose is aligned with the institution's purpose.
Yeah. I very much just deeply appreciate what you're sharing there, and especially that point about how important the work is, and also how not easy it is. And in a context where so many people come into the profession with noble, ambitious intentions, and then by design and just by tradition, perhaps, are often sort of thrown into the deep end and put to the kind of sink or swim type of test. Unfortunately, in our profession, I think most of us go through some period of grappling with these kinds of dilemmas. And there has been historically, at least in my experience, very few places to turn for some real guidance on what to do about it, unless you're fortunate enough to have a great mentor or a good coach, or maybe just an amazing professional community. And I really think this is one of the great values of the book that you've written. We were talking before you all hopped on with us here today about some of the resources that are in the appendices in the back of the book, and Manuel and I were both saying things like, these are some great questions I should bring to my team at work for us to think about, and really connecting the dots between some of the kind of health science that's out there about what burnout is and how to process through it, and also putting that stuff in a real educator lens that offers helpful tools that I think can really point people towards hopeful outcomes in our work. So really just want to say I very much appreciate the offerings you have made to folks here, and especially at this time where we know folks out there are grappling with it. We see the commentaries and editorials on Twitter and whatnot, and there are tools. There is hope in this equation, and I think you've offered that to people in many ways. Pivoting to our next question, I, as a former principal, think about this very much through the lens of leadership, and each chapter in your book ends with kind of questions and prompts for folks to think about, including for school leaders. And school leaders play such an important role in creating the conditions whereby educators will either thrive or suffer, right? Sustain or leave. And so I'm wondering what advice you would give to school leaders who are confronting these kinds of issues among their staff, or perhaps even grappling with these issues of burnout and sustainability themselves. And Meredith, I think, is the resident principal on the panel here. We'll start with you.
So it's such a good question, and it's so hard. There's no one answer, but the thing that I think about is a few things. One is making sure that there's space within your community for your teachers to reflect, and school leaders to really think about what is that space, and it should be beyond just the staff room, right? It should be an actual space where teachers can go reflect, talk. For example, at the beginning of the school year, when all the principals have their initial planning meetings with teachers, I really recommend principals using that opportunity to get an understanding of trying to get the why out of your teachers. Why did they become educators? Really get to understand it. And also as school leaders to wear that on your sleeves. Any teachers that work with me know that I was a struggling student when I was in high school, and that I really struggled to read. They know that I went through a really traumatic time in my life, my senior year, which I write about in my book, with my mom getting very sick and passing away. They know my why very deeply. And I think that is very, very important for school leaders to be transparent about their own why are they here, and that it lived within the mission of your school, and that you also show that reflection. The other piece of advice that I really think is so important for school leaders is that when they see teachers are starting to burn out, don't ignore it. Don't just pretend like it's going to go away. You need to speak with them. You have to talk with them. And it could be that they're not burning out from the teaching. It could be that they're burning out from your school for some reason. And I've had to go through this and lose some very amazing educators because of it. But if I'm losing an educator, but know that they're going to find a home that's aligned to their purpose, and another school's going to gain this educator and they're going to keep going, it's worth it, because at the end of the day, it's students. But then also as a school leader, you might ask yourself, if you know this is a very good educator, if there are changes you can make maybe you want to try to make those changes because you don't want to lose them. But you have to make some really tough decisions in figuring out what you can do. And I'm speaking this from personal experience. I've had to go through this, and it's not easy, but it's worth it. It's worth not just letting educators be showing signs of burnout without trying to do something about it. The last thing I want to say is, and Jeff, it's going back to what you were talking about before about educators. I think you were alluding to, sometimes educators feel like they're alone. They might not have a mentor or have a network. And I think it's so important that educators try to find people to talk to. Once you start feeling that isolation, it's when burnout really starts coming on strong. So it might not be the mentor you've been assigned. Maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's a mentor in another school or a colleague in another school. But find these people to speak with and connect, because educators should not feel alone. And I appreciate that thinking about the book could be that thing that helps you think through these things, to hopefully help you find the right mentor for you, or a reflection process that helps you.
I would just add, Meredith was just talking about the importance of community, and we have a chapter in the book called Nourish Your Network that is all about the importance of community in addressing burnout and supporting each other in really committing to purpose and making those hard decisions. Meredith was also talking about the conversations that school leaders have with teachers at the beginning of the year, and really grounding those conversations in an understanding of purpose. And in the appendix of the book, one of the resources that we have is a planning template, a note-taking template for folks to use during conversations like that include some recommended prompts that school leaders can use to engage their teachers in conversations about purpose from the outset of the school year. And then I would also just agree with what Meredith said about not ignoring it, not pretending that it's not there. And for leaders, I would say that's true when you start to see the signs of burnout in the teachers that you lead, but also in yourself. I think that in general, people are not as good at hiding the signs of burnout as they maybe think that they are. One of the most powerful parts of the process of writing the book was that we asked students and former students to talk to us about their experiences with teacher burnout. And some of the things that students and former students told us were sobering. One student told us she knows that her teachers burnt out when the classroom feels tense and uncomfortable, and the teacher makes them do independent work every day. So super telling. And so if students are sensing burnout in their teachers, students and teachers and staff are sensing burnout in their leaders. And so there is really no reason to pretend that it's not there when everybody knows that it is. So addressing it head on is a way to address it, but also to model what it looks like to take care of yourself for the folks that you lead, the students, the families, the teachers, and the staff.
Yeah. Such an important point, and one that I think really there's a tremendous amount of work to be done in our profession at the system level about addressing these sorts of issues, right? We are perhaps not even that good at this, but at least we're good at recognizing when we have some issues, like, what's the rate of turnover that we're having among new teachers, or what's our retention rate for principals, or what are the shortage areas and how do we incentivize people to go into those areas? And that's all well and good, but there remains this major issue of how do we sustain and invest in the people we have, and especially the people who are doing really great work, who want to stay but need the right environment and conditions and ability to thrive. And what support at the system level do we offer folks for that? Certainly in my experience, it's been very minimal. And so hopefully out there are some superintendents or school board members or that sort of thing who are going to pick up their copy of your book. And I did want to ask before we go, Rebekah and Meredith, so the book is out now. Where should people go if they want to get a copy, or how can they connect with you and learn more about the book, about your work on these kinds of topics?
So the best way to find us is at our website, which is beatingteacherburnout.com. If folks go there, they can find links to purchase the book, as well as information about us and resources and all kinds of stuff. And we're continuing to add to the website on an ongoing basis as more and more offerings are developed. People can also find us on social media at Beating Teacher Burnout and at What If Schools. And I would also say we really encourage people to purchase the book from an independent bookstore. If you go to bookshop.org, you can find an independent bookstore in your community or elsewhere that you'd like to support. And it's a great way to continue to support local businesses, small business owners, as well as independent booksellers. So please support indies as much as you can.
Nice. Love that. Love that. Last thing, folks, before we say goodbye to our wonderful guests, I would be remiss not to mention that this is, of course, not the first time I have met Rebekah and Meredith. And once upon a time, I think it was back in 2008, I had the great privilege and honor of becoming a coach for a network of schools in New York City, including the school that Meredith is currently principal of, and had the great fortune of working with both of our guests today while they were classroom teachers there and teacher leaders there, really doing just amazing instructional work. And so I hope it's not too bold of me to say this, but I am happy for you and proud of you as as just incredible educators who published a whole book in the middle of a pandemic and are offering what I think is a really important contribution to the discussion about health and sustainability in our profession. So thanks so much for joining us today here on All the Above.
Thanks so much for having us. Definitely feels like we've come full circle, Jeff.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
Thank you so much. It's so great, and it's so exciting to just spread the word, and hopefully we'll help educators out there everywhere to stay in their profession and keep that fire going.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that is it for today's seminar. Thanks so much for sticking with us, but stay around because next up is our class dismissed. All right, folks, we've come to that time in the episode where we like to pause, reflect for a moment, and give some flowers and love to people out there doing great things in the world of education. Manuel, who we got today?
Well, Jeff, this episode is dropping mid-June, and that is graduation season for sure, especially on the West Coast. And this graduating class of 2023, we want to give a very extra special, heartfelt shout out to them. And I especially am thinking about the students who are graduating from my high school who I remember as freshmen, and the world fell apart in March of their freshman year. They entered high school traditionally like, so many generations before them. But that spring, everything fell apart. And that end of freshman year was more or less a disaster for the world globally. And then in the context of California, pretty much all of their sophomore year was online, and that was its own Herculean challenge. So they basically didn't have a sophomore year of high school. And then junior year, when we returned fully on campus, it was just a tough year, man. That was a real strange year, and everybody's still, dealing in various ways with the pandemic. And it was just very odd, and all the COVID protocols everywhere, and students missing left and right. And then, of course, the Omicron surge, which, just impacted so many schools in the spring of this graduating class's junior year. And then finally back senior year to try to finish off high school. And this graduating class truly is like the pandemic class in the sense of they started high school right before the pandemic hit, and it basically shattered the middle years of high school for them. And here they are getting through and finishing after all of that. So certainly all those students, all those young people, certainly their families that did everything they could to try to keep the student on track and to try to help the student see this milestone. And I know there are A lot of ceremonies taking place across the nation, and I know folks like myself definitely have kind of like buried those memories of pandemic and distance learning and all that happened that year because it was so difficult, and I don't really think back to it very much at all. I'm like forward motion all the way and let's celebrate. And I know there's a lot of graduation ceremonies where folks are celebrating, but I just don't want it to be lost on anybody, the weight of what these young people endured and the accomplishment that is actually finishing high school despite all of that and actually being able to move on to whatever comes next. So shout out to the class of 2023. Shout out to all my little freshmen, or once freshmen and now seniors, crossing that stage. And yeah, man, there's a whole area that I need to think back on and reflect about. A lot of memories there that I just haven't gone back to because that was a mess. Not great at all. So shout out to everybody for making it through.
Yeah, man. I am. While you're talking, Manuel, I'm hearing lyrics for this class. Started from the bottom. Now we're here, man. I feel like we need some artists. We need some, some singers, some rappers, some poets somewhere out there to capture, the symbolism of this moment and help us understand and feel our way through it, because it is profound. I think we had so much big picture conversation about the effects of the pandemic, and we got to revolutionize education, and we have to accelerate learning and all these kinds of things. And underneath it was a set of kids, a set of young people who are walking across the stage or have just recently walked across the stage and found success and triumph in spite of the challenges, and might, go down in history as like one of those unique generations who lived through the 1918 flu, or who, lived through the Vietnam War or whatever, right? Like this might become that sort of thing. For this generation. So big shout out to them. Absolutely.
Yeah, and not to interrupt, but I do want to issue a quick correction. I did say shout out to everybody for making it through, and I think it's very important for us to remember that not everybody made it through. And a lot of these young people, they lost family members, and a lot of folks who were here before the pandemic hit are not here with us now, including a lot of school personnel, a ton of school personnel, bus drivers, teachers, administrators. So shout out to everybody who did make it through, and obviously love and respect to all those who didn't make it through but who are still in our hearts today as we celebrate this class of 2023.
Yes, indeed. Excellent point. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode and for making it all the way through to the end. And because you're still here listening and watching, we have one more thing we want to ask of you, and that is to just show your love and support for the show. There's so many things you can do, little quick things you can do to help. You can like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can like and subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you're on. You can go to our website, AOTAshow.com, and follow us. You can always get our latest content there and links to all our platforms. And if you click that support tab, that's AOTAshow.com/support, you can contribute. Big or small, whatever you can contribute is a huge help to help us keep this operation going here at All the Above. And lastly, I will say, if you are interested in a very enriching, powerful learning experience this summer, you need to check out the Human Restoration Project's Conference to Restore Humanity, taking place this summer, July 24th through 27th. It's an online conference, very engaging structure set up, some amazing keynote speakers, including Jose Luis Vilson, who is a former guest here on All the Above. It's going to be amazing. So go to their website, which is humanrestorationproject.org/conference. And there you can use the code AOTA to get $25 off your registration fee. That will also help support All the Above. So folks, thanks so much for sticking with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.